Hey guys, tonight we drift into one of those half-real, half-dream landscapes that ancient storytellers swore was waiting just beyond the horizon. You've probably heard whispers of Hyperborea, the frozen paradise beyond the north wind, but tonight you're actually going there, at least in your imagination. The way they described it, you get endless sunshine, no sickness, no war, and enough free time to lounge around playing lyres. Sounds like a vacation package, except you probably won't survive the trek across the Arctic wasteland to even find the place.so. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake enough, tell me your location and local time in the comments. It's always fun to see who's listening from Tokyo at sunrise and who's stuck in New York with midnight coffee jitters. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You picture yourself trudging north, each step muffled by snow that crunches like styrofoam beneath your boots. The air burns a little in your lungs, crisp and sharp, as though the planet itself doesn't really want you snooping around its hidden corners. The ancients said that if you went far enough beyond the land of the Boreas, the north wind itself, you'd pass through a kind of frozen gate. That was where Hyperborea began. Imagine a shimmering curtain of cold air, like walking through one of those grocery store freezer flaps. Except this one decides the fate of entire civilizations. Mainstream history gives you plenty of icy frontiers. Norse sagas describing Greenland, Inuit migrations across Beringia, Russian traders pushing past Siberia. All of them faced landscapes so bleak you'd think no one in their right mind would call it paradise. Yet, the Greeks, sitting under Mediterranean sun, insisted that just past the howling winds, there was a place where everything flipped, where life was easy, where crops grew, and where time itself seemed kinder. Historians still argue whether this was an allegory for spiritual bliss, a distorted memory of northern peoples, or just geography gone wild in myth. You keep walking, frost building on your scarf, until suddenly the cold lessens. At first you think it's your imagination. Then you notice the crunch of snow softening into something like grass. The air warms, not into summer heat, but into that rare, perfect temperature where you don't even think about your skin. Ahead, light spills across a horizon that seems endless. You blink, shielding your eyes, because the sun isn't setting. It just hangs there, steady, as if frozen mid-afternoon. The quirky tidbit is that some early geographers really tried to pin this place on a map. They guessed it was north of Thrace, or maybe beyond the Riphean Mountains. The only problem is, nobody could ever agree on where those mountains were. It's like labeling a GPS map with turn left at the vibes. The Greeks may have borrowed tales from Scythian traders or nomads who came from regions near the Arctic Circle, where midnight sun does exist. For those living closer to the equator, the idea of days that never end would have sounded like pure fantasy. The ground beneath your boots now feels springy, alive, and you look down to see not snow, but soft moss glowing faintly, as if infused with the sun itself. A river glides lazily to your right, its surface shimmering like polished glass. You crouch, touch the water, and expect icy shock. Instead, it's cool, fresh, perfectly drinkable, like that first gulp of bottled water after a long run. The sound of birds fills the air, their calls weaving into what almost sounds like melody. And maybe it is. The Greeks said Hyperboreans lived in constant harmony, their lives musical by nature. You imagine whole villages where people just casually hum in perfect pitch, like living inside a perpetual Disney movie. Of course, perfection comes with its own suspicious undertones. You glance around, half expecting someone to hand you a contract written in glowing runes. Sign here. Eternal happiness. Small print applies. but nobody appears. The landscape itself seems enough of a promise. You think back to history again. Cultures all over the world carried myths of distant paradises. Elysium for the Greeks, Shambhala for Tibet, Avalon for the Celts. Hyperborea fits right in, except instead of being beyond the sea or hidden in clouds, it's tucked away in the frozen north. Historians still argue whether Hyperborea was purely allegorical, a stand-in for human longing, or a garbled memory of actual lands visited by wandering tribes. Some fringe theorists even try to connect it to ancient migrations across Siberia, claiming echoes of Hyperborea live on in Arctic traditions today. That's the thing about myths. Once planted, they grow roots everywhere. You wander deeper, noticing subtle details, tall birch trees shimmering with silver bark, fields of grain swaying gently though no wind stirs. The horizon glows endlessly gold, shadows stretch but never vanish. Time here doesn't flow the same. You glance at your watch, but its hands twitch aimlessly, as if even quartz movements are too tired to keep count. That a strange calm fills your chest. You realize that this imagined land isn't just about geography. It's about how your mind longs for a place free of hardship. The Greeks gave Hyperborea its frozen gates, but really, every listener has their own version of this hidden paradise tucked somewhere beyond reach. Maybe yours involves beaches or mountain valleys, or just a city with no traffic. Hyperborea, in that sense, is humanity's collective lullaby to itself. Still, as you walk, you can't shake the sense that a test awaits. Myths rarely give paradise away for free. Maybe Hyperborea demands belief, or humility, or simply the patience to keep walking north when logic tells you to turn back. Maybe that's why so many seekers never return. They're not lost, they're absorbed into the golden light, content to hum quietly forever. You look back. The frozen gates are gone. The world behind you is sealed by mist. Ahead, the golden land stretches, endless and strangely inviting. And as you take another slow breath, you realize the first step into Hyperborea wasn't crossing ice. It was letting yourself believe the story long enough to see it. You've already stepped through those frozen gates, and now the air has warmed into something uncanny. The snow is gone, the moss beneath your feet cushions each stride, and the sunlight, well, the sunlight refuses to budge. You squint, half expecting it to slide lazily toward a horizon, but it doesn't. It hangs in the sky like a lamp left on by a forgetful god. You've entered the realm of eternal daylight, a place that ancient poets swore was bathed in the sun's glow 24 hours a day. If you've ever tried sleeping with a streetlight shining into your window, you know that endless daylight isn't necessarily paradise. Though at least here, there are no curtains to wrestle with at 3 in the morning. The Greeks described Hyperborea as a land where the sun never set. This sounded miraculous. But you know from modern geography that such things happen naturally above the Arctic Circle. In places like Tromsø, Norway, Vera, Alaska, the sun lingers all summer. Historians still argue whether the Greek stories of Hyperborea were distant echoes of travelers who witnessed this phenomenon, or whether it was just a convenient myth designed to symbolize timeless perfection. Still, for a Mediterranean mind unaccustomed to anything longer than a normal day, the idea of a sun that simply refused to leave must have sounded like stepping onto another planet. You stand there now, the golden light wrapping around you like a warm shawl. It doesn't sting, it doesn't burn. It's softer than any afternoon you've ever felt. You can almost imagine crops here growing in abundance. The poets claimed Hyperboreans never worried about famine, for the earth provided constantly, nourished by the perpetual glow. No cold nights to shrivel tender shoots, no sudden frosts to wipe out harvests, just sunlight and steady warmth, as though nature finally glow of that eternal sun still lingers on your eyelids as you wander further, and now you begin to hear voices, soft at first, then clearer, like echoes drifting down a marble hallway. You realize these are not the voices of villagers or wanderers, but of poets, the ancient Greeks themselves, whispering stories about Hyperborea. You lean in as if crouching by a campfire, except the campfire here is the unblinking daylight itself, and the poets are reciting verses that seem both foreign and familiar. Pindar, one of Greece's most celebrated lyric poets, once described the Hyperboreans as a people untouched by war, illness, or hard labor. To him, they were blessed beings, living in harmony, spending their days with music and dance. Imagine him standing before an audience in Delphi, voice rising and falling, weaving Hyperborea into the fabric of Greek imagination. You, half drowsy in the endless light, catch snippets of his verses as if they're carried on the wind. The picture is seductive, a society free from the daily grind, where everyone seems permanently cheerful. It's the kind of place travel agencies wish they could bottle. Of course, reality barges in. Mainstream history gives you countless examples of Greek poets stretching the truth for effect. Homer turned the Trojan War into an epic filled with gods meddling in human affairs. Hesiod populated the cosmos with squabbling deities. Why wouldn't Pindar inflate Hyperborea into a land of perfect happiness? Historians still argue whether these poets genuinely believed in the place or whether they used it as a convenient stage on which to set their moral lessons. After all, if you want to describe ideal virtue or perfect joy, it helps to invent a mythical homeland where those qualities flourish. You continue walking, and the voices multiply. It's as though every ancient poet has gathered here, whispering their own version of the tale. Herodotus, the father of history, pops in with his cautious skepticism. He mentions the Hyperboreans, but admits he can't quite place them on a map. He passes the myth along anyway, shrugging in textual form as if to say, take it or leave it. Meanwhile, you imagine Aristophanes cracking jokes about how Hyperboreans probably didn't pay taxes, or Euripides using them as a foil to highlight the chaos of Athens. The quirky tidbit here: some sources claimed Hyperboreans were so dedicated to music that they sent sacred offerings wrapped in straw, carried hand to hand across tribes, all the way to Delphi to honor Apollo. The journey supposedly stretched through countless lands, each community passing the offering along like a relay race of devotion. You picture it, a bundle of gifts traveling southward, handled reverently by people who had never even seen Hyperborea but swore by its holiness. It's like the ancient version of Amazon Prime, except the delivery took centuries and the package never came with tracking updates. You pause beside a shimmering brook, letting the water trickle over your fingers. In it, you hear the cadence of poetry itself, as though the land is translating natural sound into verse. You hum softly, almost without realizing it, and your tune fits seamlessly into the ambient rhythm. That's the trick of this place. It makes you musical even if your karaoke history suggests otherwise. The poets weren't lying, at least not completely. Hyperborea really does hum, but then the thought intrudes. If Hyperboreans were so perpetually happy, doesn't that make them just a little suspicious? Human nature thrives on contrast. Without sorrow, joy loses its sparkle. Without conflict, peace has no texture. You wonder whether the poets left something out, polishing the myth into perfection while ignoring any inconvenient truths. Historians still argue whether ancient descriptions of Hyperborea were propaganda, idealized tales designed to criticize their own messy societies by comparison. In that light, Hyperborea wasn't a destination but a mirror, held up to reveal how flawed Athens or Sparta really was. The air around you seems to thicken with the weight of their verses. You imagine Pindar smiling smugly, Sappho raising an eyebrow, Herodotus fumbling with notes, all of them competing to control the narrative. You laugh softly at the absurdity. Hyperborea has become less a place than a literary battleground, the ancient equivalent of an internet comment section where everyone insists they know the truth. And yet, in your ears, their voices still sound strangely soothing, like lullabies threaded with scholarly bickering. You push forward into a clearing where the sunlight gleams off polished stones arranged in a circle. The acoustics here are uncanny. You whisper, and the sound expands, weaving into a chorus that seems to answer you. You realize this might have been how the poets imagined it, a land where words themselves carried weight, where every spoken line became music. No wonder they were described as cheerful. How could you frown if every grumble turned into a ballad? Though you admit, living in a world where complaints become songs might get awkward fast. Sorry I'm late for dinner morphs into a 3-minute aria nobody asked for. You recline against one of the warm stones, eyes half shut, listening to the poets bicker and sing. For a moment, you feel their joy, the kind of lightness that only comes when you forget about time, duty, or bills. Maybe this was the true purpose of Hyperborea in their verses, not to describe a real place, but to offer listeners a reprieve, a mental holiday where worries melted away in music. As the chorus fades, you catch one last fragment, something about joy unending, sunlight eternal, harmony without flaw. You smile, because while your skeptical brain raises an eyebrow, your sleepy brain thinks, maybe a story this beautiful doesn't need to be true. Maybe it just needs to be told. And here you are, drifting deeper into the myth, carried along by whispers of Greek poets who never stopped humming about a frozen paradise. The chorus of poets fades into the background as you press forward, and the terrain begins to shift. The fields of soft moss and endless light give way to something rougher, crags of ice that jut up like ancient monuments, half melted and glittering in the eternal sun. You trace the path between them, boots crunching against stone, and realize this is the part of Hyperborea that nobody really mapped out. It's not the paradise you heard in poetry. It's the approach, the passage, the secret routes whispered about, but rarely written down. Imagine traders in antiquity, men with wind-burned faces and cracked hands, trudging across these frozen corridors carrying goods southward. They would have come from lands the Greeks only dimly understood: Siberian steppes, Arctic coasts, snowbound mountains. For them, this was not fantasy, it was survival. They learned to navigate across ice by reading the stars, feeling the winds, and trusting the crunch of snow. And maybe, just maybe, some of those journeys inspired the myth of Hyperborea. Historians still argue whether these trade routes existed in continuous form, or if what we imagine as secret paths were more like scattered, half-forgotten trails stitched together in myth. You step carefully along a ledge, watching the sunlight fracture into prisms on the ice. It's dazzling, almost too bright, as if nature itself were trying to hide its pathways behind a curtain of glare. You shield your eyes, squinting, and for a moment you think you see movement, shadows of travelers slipping silently across the snow, their figures tall, cloaked, and strangely calm. Perhaps they are just tricks of light, or perhaps they are memories of those who passed before, traders who knew how to cross this border between myth and reality. One mainstream historical fact stands out. The ancient Scythians, nomadic horsemen of the steppes, maintained vast networks of trade stretching from Central Asia into Europe. Archaeologists have uncovered Scythian burial mounds filled with imported goods, Greek pottery, Persian jewelry, Chinese silk. If the Scythians could manage that much exchange, Why not imagine other northern tribes carrying strange stories south? Perhaps tales of a land beyond the wind, where the sun never set, began as travelers' shorthand for faraway lands with seasons unfamiliar to Greeks. The quirky tidbit? Some maps from the Middle Ages depicted rivers flowing from a northern paradise straight into Europe, as if Hyperborea itself were the source of all prosperity. Picture a medieval cartographer scratching away by candlelight, drawing wiggly rivers that fed from a blank white space labeled with mystery. It was less science and more wishful thinking, but it planted the idea that somewhere in the ice there must be hidden passages, roads nobody else had discovered. You crouch low, running your hand across the icy surface. It's smoother than glass, polished by centuries of wind. Beneath, you catch glimpses of something darker, stone, or maybe carvings. For a moment, you imagine these are not just natural pathways, but deliberate constructions laid by hands long before recorded history. Your mind leaps to fringe theories. What if Hyperboreans carved routes into the very bones of the earth, leaving frozen highways that only the worthy could cross? Outlandish, sure, but you can't deny the way your heart quickens at the thought. As you continue, the landscape opens onto a vast plain of snow, broken only by distant ridges. The air is sharp, clean, with no echo of birds or music. Only silence, broken by your breath. You realize these secret paths would have been brutally lonely. Traders walking them would have had little comfort except the crunch of their boots and the knowledge that every step carried them farther from home. Yet in that silence lies the seed of myth. When you've walked alone for days under a sun that refuses to set, your mind starts weaving stories. You begin to believe in lands of eternal peace, if only because the alternative, endless ice, feels unbearable. Historians still argue whether the Hyperborea myth was simply a geographical misunderstanding. Perhaps beyond the north wind referred not to another world, but just to Siberia or the Arctic coast, places harsh yet survivable, where outsiders might glimpse unfamiliar ways of life. To Greeks, who knew mountains and seas but not tundra, the north seemed alien enough to house a utopia. You crest a hill and find yourself staring at an unexpected sight, a narrow pass lined with pillars of ice that almost resemble columns. They shimmer in the light, translucent, casting long blue shadows. You walk between them, feeling as though you've stepped into a temple carved not by human hands, but by the elements themselves. Perhaps this is why myths grew around these places. The land looked sacred without needing any gods to claim it. Your mind wanders to modern explorers, the kind who strap on crampons and march into white voids. Many of them reported strange illusions, mirages of mountains that vanished when approached, sounds of voices carried by wind, flashes of color across snow. Imagine ancient traders experiencing the same, then returning home with tales of ghostly paths across the ice. To a Greek listener, these weren't hallucinations. They were proof that beyond the north wind, reality itself began to change. The silence grows heavy, but strangely comforting. You feel the path guiding you even without visible markers, as though your feet instinctively know the way. Maybe that's the secret. Hyperborea isn't a place reached by compass, but by surrender. You stop resisting, let your steps fall in rhythm, and soon the landscape itself seems to carry you forward to the far end of the plain. You see a break in the ice where sunlight floods through like a spotlight. The path leads directly toward it. As you walk, you imagine countless others doing the same. Scythian traders, wandering shamans, poets chasing rumors, all pulled northward by something they couldn't name. For them, it wasn't just trade or travel. It was pilgrimage. You step into the glow, and the ice around you shatters into 1,000 shards of rainbow light. The path dissolves, leaving you standing in a golden field again, as though the harsh journey was only a threshold. The poets had sung of joy, and the traders had whispered of paths. Both were right. Hyperborea, it seems, always requires effort to reach, but the reward is this: stepping from frozen silence into endless warmth. The golden field spreads around you again, warm and humming, but this time your eyes are drawn upward. Rising above the horizon are shapes that don't quite belong to nature. Towering structures, gleaming faintly in the eternal daylight. They look like monuments, temples, maybe even cities, but built on a scale that makes your neck ache as you crane to see the tops. The myths always hinted that the Hyperboreans weren't just a happy people lounging in the sun. They were builders, skyborn architects whose works rivaled anything in Egypt or Mesopotamia. You step closer, feet brushing over smooth stone that feels too precise to be random. Pillars climb into the light, their surfaces etched with patterns you can't quite decipher, spirals, constellations, and figures that seem to shift when you glance away. Your imagination whispers, maybe these weren't made by human hands at all. Fringe thinkers have long tied Hyperborea to tales of lost civilizations, cultures so advanced they left behind monumental architecture that later people mistook for natural formations. You run your palm over the stone. It's warm, humming faintly, as though the monument itself is alive. That a mainstream historical fact. Across the world, megaliths rise from ancient times. Stonehenge in England, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the giant stone heads of Easter Island. Archaeologists still puzzle over the techniques used to move and arrange stones weighing tons. To ancient minds, the builders must have seemed superhuman, skyborn even. Perhaps the Hyperborean legend borrowed from similar awe. When you see stones aligned with stars, the urge to invent supernatural architects is strong. Historians still argue whether such myths reflect real migrations of knowledge, travelers teaching stonework, or whether they were independent marvels that humanity simply repeated across continents. You move between the colossal columns, hearing faint echoes as if your footsteps trigger hidden harmonies. The air here vibrates differently, almost charged. You wonder if this was the heart of Hyperborean life, a place where temples rose not only to gods, but to the very sky itself. Ancient sources sometimes claim the Hyperboreans were descended from celestial beings. Apollo himself, the sun god, was said to visit them, basking in their endless daylight. You imagine him lounging here, sipping divine cocktails, admiring the handiwork. And honestly, who wouldn't? These structures radiate calm power, the kind that makes even your tired modern brain feel reverent. The quirky tidbit: some fringe theories suggest that Hyperborea's builders used levitation or sound to move their stones. It sounds wild, but then again, the acoustics here are strange. You clap your hands experimentally, and the sound ripples outward, echoing not once, but multiple times, like layers folding back. You can almost believe sound itself could shift stone, guiding it gently into place. Imagine a choir of Hyperboreans singing a wall into existence. A construction crew with perfect pitch, that's both efficient and terrifying. You stop before what looks like an altar, though it towers far above your head. Symbols cover its surface, faintly glowing. You squint, trying to interpret them, but they refuse to settle into any language you know. Historians still argue whether such imagined architecture was based on real ruins encountered by ancient travelers. Siberia, for example, holds sites like the megalithic walls of Mount Shoria, where massive stone blocks appear stacked with uncanny precision. Mainstream scholars call them natural formations, the result of geology. Fringe theorists insist they're remnants of a lost northern civilization, perhaps Hyperborea itself. You tilt your head, Wondering if you're staring at metaphor or memory. Moving deeper, the monuments grow stranger. Some look like spiraled towers reaching toward the eternal sun. Others resemble vast amphitheaters cut directly into the rock. You sit on a smooth ledge, imagining what gatherings might have taken place here. Maybe festivals of song, the whole Hyperborean people humming together until the air shook. Maybe ceremonies where Apollo himself descended, basking in endless light while mortals strummed harps. Or maybe it was just their version of Tuesday. Everyday life unfolding inside architecture so majestic it outshines our modern skyscrapers. You let your imagination run further. What if the Hyperboreans really were skyborn? Not literal aliens, but people whose knowledge seemed to fall from the heavens. They might have understood astronomy with uncanny precision, aligning their structures not just to the sun, but to hidden stars. You glance upward, but here, under eternal daylight, no stars are visible. Still, you feel them watching, etched into the very designs carved into the stone. Perhaps these monuments are calendars, records of the sky from an age when constellations looked slightly different. The wind sighs through the structures, producing a low, resonant tone. You freeze, listening. It's not random. It's harmonic, like an organ built into the world itself. The monuments aren't silent. They sing with the air. You smile, because it fits perfectly with the Hyperborean myth, a people of music, joy, and harmony, even in their architecture. Imagine living in a house that hummed lullabies when the wind passed through its windows. Sure, it might get annoying during a storm, but in this eternal calm, it feels soothing, like background music for existence. Of course, your skeptical brain butts in. Could these ruins just be exaggerated landscapes? Rock formations interpreted as walls, mountains mistaken for towers? Historians still argue whether ancient descriptions of grand architecture in faraway lands were based on reality or on the human tendency to see order in chaos. After all, a cliff face in the right light can look like a carved wall. But as you trace your hand across the smooth, symmetrical lines, it's hard not to believe someone shaped this deliberately. You wander until you reach a wide platform overlooking the Golden Plain. From here, the monuments stretch endlessly, a city without end. No crowds bustle, no smoke rises, no sound but the hum of wind. It feels both alive and abandoned, as though the builders finished their work and then simply left. Perhaps that's the secret of Hyperborea's skyborn architects. They were never meant to stay. They built their monuments as messages, leaving behind whispers carved in stone, then moved on, vanishing into light. You sit cross-legged on the platform, staring at the horizon. For a moment, you let yourself believe. Maybe Hyperborea was real. Maybe once, long ago, a people lived here, singing walls into place, aligning temples with the stars, dancing in sunlight that never ended. And maybe their greatest secret was not the stone itself, but the reminder that humans, any humans, can dream of building higher, greater, more beautifully than their age expects. The hum of wind still lingers in your ears as you leave the platform of the skyborn monuments. The structures fade into the distance, but their presence sticks to your skin, like the faint warmth of stone after a summer afternoon. You follow a path that seems to form naturally beneath your steps, winding down into a broad valley. The air shifts, cooler, denser, and you notice a shimmer along the edges of the landscape. It's almost as though a veil separates this place from the rest of the world. You step through, and suddenly the light changes. Instead of the golden glow of perpetual day, a softer, more silver radiance settles over everything. Ahead, carved into a hillside, is something that chills you more than towering temples ever could: a labyrinth. Its entrance yawns like a doorway into thought itself. Curving corridors spiral downward, not designed for worship or housing, but for testing. The myths of Hyperborea often painted the people as joyous, carefree, basking in Apollo's light. But there's another layer in old whispers, hints of knowledge hidden in complex labyrinths. You stand at the threshold, realizing this isn't about keeping intruders out. It's about testing who is worthy to go in. Your fingers brush the stone at the entrance. Unlike the monuments, this labyrinth feels colder, more mathematical. Each wall is etched with strange grooves that could be writing or diagrams, or just the result of time. You can't tell. Historians still argue whether labyrinth symbolism in ancient myths, from Crete's Minotaur maze to India's mandalas, originated from shared cultural contact or developed independently. Yet the pattern persists. Humanity loves the idea of mazes as vessels of secret knowledge. You take a step inside. The echo of your footstep rings oddly, bouncing back at you from multiple directions, as if the maze has a mind. The floor is smooth, too smooth to be accidental. You run your hand along the wall, tracing a groove that spirals into an unfamiliar symbol. For a moment, your mind spins. Did Hyperborea hide its wisdom here, encoded in paths and turns? A secret library written not in books, but in space itself. Mainstream fact for grounding. In Crete, the ruins of Knossos once inspired stories of the labyrinth where Theseus slew the Minotaur. Archaeologists have shown the palace's vast corridors could easily confuse visitors, giving birth to the myth. Still, the symbolism stuck. Mazes became metaphors for both danger and enlightenment. Imagine the Hyperborean version, but without any monsters lurking, only the challenge of your own persistence. Quirky tidbit: some fringe writers claimed Hyperborea's labyrinth wasn't stone at all, but made of living ice that reshaped itself. You grin at the absurdity, picturing a maze that politely rearranges whenever you make a wrong turn. Oh, sorry, door's over here. Honestly, that would make IKEA shopping trips a lot smoother. Deeper inside, the labyrinth grows darker. Shadows coil where light refuses to enter. The walls close in, then expand suddenly into vast chambers where echoes multiply like whispers. You hear voices, not real voices, just your mind turning sound into meaning. They murmur fragments, half sentences in no language you know. You steady yourself, reminding your brain that the acoustics of stone can play tricks. Still, the thought tickles. What if the labyrinth really does contain voices of Hyperborea's past? Historians still argue whether labyrinth myths represent literal structures or symbolic journeys. Some suggest they were meditative tools, walking a complex pattern to induce altered states of mind. You pace slowly, noticing how the path forces your body into rhythm. Left, right, spiral inward. Your breathing syncs with your steps until you feel as though you're being lulled into the heart of something ancient. The floor changes texture. Smoothness gives way to carvings, lines forming geometric grids. You kneel, tracing them, and realize they align with the constellations you can't see under perpetual daylight. Could the labyrinth be a star map? Each chamber a coordinate, each twist a celestial marker? Perhaps the Hyperboreans encoded their astronomical knowledge here, forcing initiates to walk the stars step by step. And here's a playful modern thought. Imagine archaeologists discovering a Hyperborean labyrinth and realizing it's basically the world's largest escape room. No puzzles on paper, no locks, just your endurance and spatial memory tested against ancient geometry. You probably wouldn't survive the experience, but hey, at least the Yelp review would be memorable. The further you go, the stranger it becomes. One chamber hums faintly, just like the monuments outside, the sound reverberating in your chest. Another has walls that shimmer, reflecting your face in distorted forms. Older, younger, sometimes not even human. You shiver, wondering if this is the labyrinth's way of teaching, forcing you to confront the many shapes of yourself. You've come for secrets, but perhaps the secret is you. Classic mystical trick, and yet practicality tugs at you. Could the Hyperboreans have used this as a storehouse? Hidden chambers filled with scrolls, tools, maybe even treasures of a forgotten world? We know that in Egypt, labyrinthine structures existed, the so-called Labyrinth of Hira, described by Herodotus, with thousands of rooms. Archaeologists debate how much of it was real versus exaggerated, but the concept was powerful. A building designed to guard secrets simply by overwhelming the seeker. You glance into a side passage and imagine shelves lined with artifacts, locked behind geometry itself. You wander for what feels like hours. The turns blur together, yet somehow you're not panicked. The Hyperborean labyrinth doesn't want to trap you. It wants to exhaust you gently, lull you into surrender. Your eyelids droop with the rhythm of steps, the soft scrape of feet against stone, the faint hum of walls. You realize the labyrinth might not just test knowledge. It might induce sleep, a literal dream machine. Suddenly, it makes sense. Hyperborea's labyrinth isn't for escape. It's for drifting. At last, you stumble into a central chamber. The ceiling vanishes into glowing light, the walls pulsing with soft radiance. At the center lies a single object, a smooth, round stone, glowing faintly like a captured star. You touch it, and warmth floods your body. Perhaps this is the labyrinth's heart, its memory core. Or maybe it's just a really pretty rock. Either way, you feel calmer, more centered. The maze hasn't stolen from you. It has given you a strange serenity. When you finally turn back, the exit is just there. No retracing, no confusion. You step out into silver daylight, blinking as the golden horizon of monuments returns. Behind you, the labyrinth melts into shadow as though it never existed. The labyrinth still lingers in your mind, its spirals echoing behind your eyelids. You walk away slowly, as if afraid to shake off the calm it wrapped around you. Ahead, the land rises into terraces that stretch like stairways to the sky. These aren't natural ridges. They're too precise, too evenly spaced. Each step is lined with pale stones, their surfaces smoothed as though countless feet have passed over them. You climb, and the rhythm of your movement feels oddly familiar, almost ritualistic. Terraces like these have existed across the globe. Machu Picchu's carved slopes in Peru, the step pyramids of Mesoamerica, even the agricultural terraces of Asia. Mainstream historians agree such designs were practical, preventing erosion, conserving water, feeding vast populations. But here, in the land of Hyperborea, practicality seems almost secondary. The terraces feel more like a ceremonial ladder, a bridge between ground and sky. The higher you go, the thinner the air becomes, though not uncomfortably so. You notice strange plants clinging to the steps, broad-leafed, silver-tinted, their edges glowing faintly in the light. You brush one gently and find its surface cool, almost metallic. Were Hyperboreans gardeners as well as stargazers? Ancient texts often describe them as blessed with abundance, living without toil. Perhaps these terraces were not farms at all but sacred gardens, designed to mirror the heavens. That a quirky tidbit comes to mind. Some fringe writers once joked that Hyperboreans cultivated plants that could sing. No, really, botanists laughed it off, of course. But picture it. You pluck a leaf and it hums middle C. You'd never need Spotify again. Your inner skeptic smirks, but your ears strain anyway, half hoping for a faint tune carried on the wind. At the terrace's midpoint, you pause and glance back. The view stretches endlessly, golden fields, winding rivers, and the faint shimmer of the labyrinth's valley far below. It's breathtaking, but also eerie. The silence here is so profound you almost wish for the chaos of city traffic, a car horn, even someone's phone ringtone. Instead, the only sound is your own breathing and the faint rustle of silver leaves. Historians still argue whether Hyperborean terraces were purely symbolic or functional. Were they used to map celestial alignments, each step matching a star's rise? Or were they a stage where processions climbed slowly, echoing the journey of souls toward enlightenment? The lack of evidence leaves gaps wide enough for imagination to build castles, or in this case, stairways. At last, you reach a plateau. Carved into its surface is a vast circle, its grooves forming spirals that overlap like ripples in water. You walk across it, your footsteps ringing faintly, and realize this might be a massive calendar. Civilizations everywhere had them. The Mayans, with their intricate glyph wheels, Stonehenge, aligning solstices through towering stones. Even the Egyptians, whose temples framed the sun at precise times of year. Hyperborea, it seems, joined the same cosmic club, and here's your cheeky reality check. Imagine using a terrace calendar to schedule a dentist appointment. Yeah, sorry, can't make it Monday. My step alignment with Venus is off. Hyperboreans may have gazed at the stars for spiritual reasons, but it's fun to imagine them juggling cosmic schedules like overbooked office workers. The spiral beneath your feet glows faintly as sunlight strikes its grooves. You follow the pattern inward, circling slowly, and notice that the path seems designed to calm the mind, just like the labyrinth. Was this entire landscape constructed as a massive psychological machine? Terraces to exhaust the body, spirals to soothe the spirit, gardens to nourish the senses. You begin to wonder if Hyperborea wasn't just a civilization, but a kind of therapy, a living retreat for weary humans. Your hand brushes another silverleaf plant, and this time you feel a tingle travel up your arm. You shake it off, half laughing. Maybe the garden does sing, just not in notes you can hear. Quirky theories aside, you can't deny the terraces radiate an aura of purpose. Every stone feels intentional, every groove aligned with something greater. At the plateau's far edge, you spot a set of stairs leading higher. You climb them slowly, your legs aching, though you're not sure whether from fatigue or awe. At the summit, the terraces flatten into a vast platform. In its center rises a monolith unlike the others, taller, thinner, glowing faintly. Around it, the terraces curve outward like petals of a cosmic flower. You realize you're standing at the heart of something immense, a design that only makes sense from above. From the ground, it's terraces. From the sky, it must look like a starburst. Historians still argue whether ancient monuments were meant to be seen from the heavens. The Nazca lines in Peru, for instance, giant geoglyphs visible only from the air, still baffle researchers. Did their creators ever expect someone to look down from the sky? Or were they making offerings to gods they assumed hovered above? The Hyperborean terraces, viewed from this summit, seem to whisper the same question. Who was meant to see the starburst? Humans? Gods? Or perhaps visitors from elsewhere? Your head swims slightly at the thought. Maybe it's the thin air. Maybe it's the sheer scale of everything around you. Either way, you sink onto a stone step, letting the hum of wind fill your ears. You're perched between earth and sky, and for a moment, you can almost believe you're part of something larger. A puzzle piece in a cosmic pattern carved by hands long gone. The terraces don't give you answers. They give you perspective. And as you close your eyes, breathing slowly, you realize that's exactly what Hyperborea may have wanted all along. Your legs still buzz from the climb as you leave the terraces behind, and yet the stone under your feet feels like it's pulling you further in, guiding you. Ahead rises something even stranger. The silhouettes of pillars, hundreds of them, fanning out across a wide plain. They look almost like an army frozen mid-march, some upright, others toppled, their edges worn smooth by time. At first glance, you think of Stonehenge, but magnified to a scale that makes you feel small, as if you've stepped into the living room of giants. Walking among them, you notice that no two pillars are identical. Some are etched with spirals, others with jagged lightning-like patterns, and a few are carved into rough figures that resemble animals, or maybe constellations. It's easy to see why people across history built similar sites. Britain's megaliths, Turkey's Göbekli Tepe, or even Karnak in France with its eerie stone rows. Mainstream historians agree these structures had ritual purposes, maybe calendars, maybe sanctuaries. But here, in Hyperborea, the scope feels theatrical. One toppled stone reveals a cross-section of crystalline veins, glinting faintly in the light. That's odd. Megaliths elsewhere were usually granite or sandstone, not glittering like giant geodes. You tap it lightly, and it resonates, a deep hum that makes your chest vibrate. Suddenly you imagine whole ceremonies here, thousands of people chanting while pillars answered in low harmonics. Fringe theorists once joked these stones were the Bluetooth speakers of the ancients. Sure, that's stretching it, but the sound truly does thrum like an oversized tuning fork. Your footsteps echo strangely between the rows, sometimes ahead of you, sometimes beside you, like invisible companions keeping pace. It's unsettling, though you tell yourself it's just acoustics. And yet, the design feels intentional, almost like the builders knew how to manipulate sound. Historians still argue whether ancient people engineered acoustics deliberately or stumbled into them. At Newgrange in Ireland, a whisper inside carries as if shouted. Could Hyperborea have taken such knowledge to its extreme? You brush your fingers over a carving, a cluster of dots connected with lines. It looks unmistakably like a star map. Or Ion, maybe. Or perhaps the Pleiades, the Seven Sisters constellation that appears in myths from Greece to Japan to the Americas. Everywhere humanity looked up, they saw those stars, and everywhere they told stories about them. The Hyperborean version, etched into cold stone, suggests they too were linking heaven to earth through architecture. But here's your cheeky reality check. Imagine giving someone directions in Hyperborea. Meet me at the third giant rock past Orion's left shoulder. Not exactly Google Maps-friendly. As you wander deeper, the air shifts. It's warmer here, though no sunbeam explains it. You notice several pillars leaning inward, creating narrow corridors. Passing through, you feel a funneling of wind, a pressure on your ears like descending in an airplane. These passages seem engineered to shape invisible forces. Air, sound, maybe even magnetism. You can't shake the thought that the stones are less about worship and more about experiment. A laboratory without wires or screens that a quirky tidbit surfaces. Some early fringe archaeologists once claimed megaliths across the world were part of a global energy grid, like ancient charging stations for travelers. Mainstream scholars rolled their eyes, but here in the Hyperborean forest of pillars, the idea doesn't feel entirely ridiculous. If your phone suddenly lit up with full bars, you wouldn't be surprised. Well, you'd be thrilled, because let's be honest, ancient Wi-Fi would solve half of history's mysteries. At the center of the field stands a cluster of taller stones arranged in a circle. Their tops angle inward, almost touching, as if trying to form a dome. You step inside and immediately notice the silence. The wind cuts off, the echoes vanish, and it feels like you've walked into a sound vacuum. Your breathing is loud, your heartbeat louder. It's eerie, but also comforting, as though the stones are shielding you. Historians still argue whether such effects were intentional or incidental. Did ancient builders truly master acoustic isolation? Or are we just anthropomorphizing chance? In the stillness, your mind wanders. Imagine ceremonies where Hyperborean priests whispered secrets inside this chamber, their words inaudible to anyone beyond. A perfect vault for oral tradition, encoded not on paper but in stone acoustics. And maybe those secrets included the great mysteries, the origins of their people, maps of their journeys, instructions for survival. The kind of knowledge that, if rediscovered, could rewrite history books. Outside the chamber, you notice the stones are aligned in long avenues stretching toward the horizon. You recall how at Stonehenge, solstice sunrises pierce perfectly through aligned stones. Here, though, the alignments seem to match not only the sun but other points, the moon's extremes, perhaps, or even less obvious celestial markers. Could the megalith forest have been both temple and observatory? A place to track cycles too vast for a single lifetime. You tilt your head back, imagining the sky thousands of years ago, unpolluted by city lights, glowing with stars. The stones rise like frozen rays, framing the heavens, turning the sky itself into part of the architecture. Suddenly, the silence doesn't feel like absence but presence, a reminder that sometimes the loudest message is written in the sky above. And just as that thought settles, a breeze returns, brushing past the pillars with a low, flute-like whistle. You almost laugh. It sounds as though the stones are playing you out, a reminder that you're only passing through their ancient symphony. You drift onward from the whispering stones, your pulse still attuned to their phantom music, and before long the ground begins to slant downward. The forest of pillars thins, and the path carries you into a low basin. At first, you assume it's another hollow carved by glaciers, but then you catch the smell: wet reeds, stagnant water, the earthy sweetness of decay. The basin isn't dry at all. It's a marsh, a shimmering mosaic of ponds and grasses. In the dim glow, the surface ripples with tiny insect wings. Somewhere nearby, a frog croaks like a stubborn metronome, keeping rhythm against the night. You stop at the edge, your boots sinking slightly in the muck. The marsh stretches wide, dotted with half-submerged wooden posts. Some are crooked, leaning like drunken sentinels, while others remain surprisingly upright. They aren't random. They line up into squares and circles, ghostly outlines of structures long vanished. Historians still argue whether ancient wetlands were simply wastelands to be avoided or whether they held sacred significance. But in Hyperborea, it's clear, this marsh was once a place of ritual. Kneeling, you brush the water's edge and notice faint carvings on one surviving post. Spirals again. Always spirals. Those endless loops hinting at life, death, rebirth. Mainstream archaeologists have recorded similar carvings on wooden stakes at Lake Nemi in Italy, where Romans once sank boats for their goddess. A quirky tidbit: some of those ritual boats were dedicated to Diana and later dredged up in Mussolini's time, only to be destroyed again in World War II. History sometimes acts like a careless child, building towers of blocks and then smashing them down. But here, the Hyperborean marsh feels preserved by its own dampness. The posts glisten as if varnished by centuries of mist. A hush falls, even the frogs holding their breath, and in that pause you feel watched. You glance across the pools and notice something uncanny, reflections that don't quite match. A cluster of posts mirrored perfectly, except in the water they form a different shape, more like an eye than a circle. You blink, step sideways, and the illusion vanishes. Or maybe it wasn't an illusion. Maybe the marsh itself was part of the design. Its surface a canvas for reflections, a mirror world where rituals played out twice. once in flesh, once in water. Your mind drifts to the many cultures that revered wetlands. The Celts offering swords to bogs, the Mayas sinking sacrifices into cenotes, even the Vikings leaving treasures in peat. Marshes were thresholds, half land, half water, neither here nor there. And so they became perfect doorways to the other world. Standing ankle-deep in Hyperborea's version, you understand why. The ground trembles faintly, and you almost expect a hand to rise from the black surface, clutching something shiny like in an Arthurian legend. You chuckle to yourself. No thanks, mysterious swamp arm. I'm just here for the ASMR tour. You press deeper into the marsh, weaving along patches of firmer earth. At one point, your foot sloshes into a hidden sinkhole, nearly pitching you forward. You mutter something less than heroic, and for a moment you picture yourself preserved in peat for 3,000 years to be dug up by some wide-eyed archaeologist. The reality check. You probably won't survive this bog walk, you think and grin. At least the future textbook illustration would be flattering. The path eventually leads to a low mound rising from the marsh's center, an island amid reeds. Upon it, stones encircle a hollow pit, blackened around the rim. A fire once burned here, and burned often. Charcoal still clings to the cracks. You crouch and feel the faintest warmth, though logically there should be none. Did Hyperboreans trek across this marsh to hold nighttime ceremonies? The flames mirrored in the dark pools, doubled by water and sky. You imagine hundreds of faces lit by flickering fire, their voices blending with the croak of frogs, the buzz of insects, the eerie echoes of marsh acoustics. Historians still argue whether ritual sites were communal or exclusive. Was the whole village invited, or only the chosen few? The marsh mound suggests secrecy, an island you had to work to reach, perhaps crossing only at special times of year. You can almost hear the whisper of songs carried over water, ancient hymns that seeped into the reeds and never left. You glance down again at the spirals carved into the posts. In water, spirals look like whirlpools, pulling everything inward. Could Hyperboreans have seen this marsh as a spiral itself? Life flowing into death, souls circling into the other world, only to be reborn again? A theory as damp and slippery as the ground beneath you, but strangely comforting. And then, a final surprise. As you leave the mound, you spot something gleaming under shallow water. You kneel, dip your hand, and retrieve a fragment of metal, green with patina. It's a small blade, dull now, but clearly once ceremonial. Mainstream history tells us bronze tools often ended their lives in wetlands, offerings to unseen gods. Here in Hyperborea, the same tradition seems alive. Someone centuries ago walked out into this marsh, raised this blade, and let it fall into the dark water. Why? Gratitude? Fear? Bargaining? The marsh keeps its answer sealed tight. You slide the fragment back into the muck, where it belongs, and straighten up. The air smells thicker now, rich with peat and mystery. You exhale slowly, letting the marsh swallow your breath too, another offering to a place that thrives on secrets. You step away from the marsh, the damp earth clinging to your boots as if reluctant to let you go. The air shifts as you climb a gentle rise, and soon the reeds give way to dry ground again. Ahead, the outline of stone structures emerges, rising from the mist like abandoned chess pieces on a board nobody's finished playing. These are not natural formations. You can see right away the deliberate geometry. Pillars set at right angles, blocks stacked with eerie precision, doorways leading nowhere. It's a ruined city, or at least the skeleton of one. Hyperborea is often painted in myth as a land of perpetual spring and harmony, but standing here, you see the scars of abandonment. Stones cracked by frost, arches collapsed into rubble, paths swallowed by creeping moss. Historians still argue whether cities this far north could have survived harsh climates, or whether tales of them were just echoes of travelers' exaggerations. But under your feet is the undeniable truth. Someone built here, someone lived here, and then someone left. You wander down a crumbling street, your steps hollow against the stone. The walls on either side are lined with faded carvings. You trace your finger along one, a bird, wings spread wide, almost like an eagle but stylized into abstract shapes. Mainstream history tells us many cultures adopted bird motifs, from Mesopotamian eagles to Native American thunderbirds. Birds meant freedom, vision, connection to the divine. Here, in Hyperborea, the bird seems to be everywhere, etched into lintels, scattered across fallen stones, even carved into paving slabs. It's almost as if the entire city was under the protection or surveillance of something winged. You duck under a broken archway and find yourself in a wide square. The centerpiece is a toppled obelisk, its top half lying askew like a beached whale. Oddly enough, the base is still intact, with spiral markings circling it like a barber's pole. Spirals again. You sigh and grin. If I see one more spiral, I'm going to start spinning myself, you murmur. A little joke to keep the creepiness in check. Dot on the obelisk's surface. Faint etchings suggest constellations, dots linked by lines. Some look familiar, the shape of Orion's belt, the curve of Ursa Major. But then others veer into impossible arrangements, stars you don't recognize. Scholars debate endlessly whether ancient star maps recorded real skies, symbolic skies, or entirely imagined ones. The unsettling part? Some of these star patterns match modern observations of constellations only visible from the southern hemisphere. How could they appear here, in a city supposedly far to the north? You wander further, and the city reveals more of its puzzle box nature. Streets that seem to lead somewhere abruptly end in blank walls. Doorways open into empty courtyards with no exits. One narrow lane doubles back on itself, looping like a maze. You begin to wonder if this city wasn't designed for living at all. Maybe it was a ritual labyrinth, a stone puzzle to disorient the body so the mind could focus inward. Quirky fact: in Crete, the labyrinth of the Minotaur might have been less about trapping monsters and more about sacred dance rituals. Could Hyperborea's ruined city have been something similar? A grand choreography of stone and silence. Your steps echo oddly in one plaza, bouncing back in layered waves. You clap your hands, and the sound seems to multiply, scattering across the stones as though a whole crowd answered back. The acoustics are uncanny, engineered, maybe. Historians still argue whether ancient builders deliberately designed echo chambers, but here it feels intentional. Imagine chants rising in such a place, voices reverberating until they blurred into a single drone, a single heartbeat for the entire city. You climb a set of fractured stairs leading up to what must have been a temple. From here, the view stretches wide, the marsh glistening in the distance, the standing stones you left behind, the dark edge of forest hemming everything in. The city sits in the middle, like a hub connecting all spokes of Hyperborea's wheel. It makes you wonder if this land was more than just myth. Maybe it was the memory of a culture that mapped, planned, and lived in patterns too vast to grasp at once. To the top, you find a chamber half buried in rubble. Crawling inside, you're surprised to see faint pigments still clinging to the walls. Reds, ochres, and deep blues, forming murals that haven't entirely faded. One shows figures with outstretched arms, standing around a circle of fire. Another depicts a giant bird. Yes, again, this time hovering above a cityscape. Its wings arc protectively, but its eyes are strange. One looking skyward, the other fixed firmly on the ground. You shiver. It feels like an omen carved in color. Mainstream historians might call this an allegory. Birds as sun symbols, fire as renewal. Fringe theorists might argue it depicts an actual being, something worshipped or even encountered here. As you stare at the murals, you lean toward the latter. The figures aren't painted with fear, but with reverence, as though they lived alongside something immense and winged. The air in the chamber is stifling, thick with dust. You crouch lower, noticing cracks in the stone floor. Beneath, a hollow space gapes like a hidden cellar. You knock on it, and the sound is unmistakably hollow. A buried chamber? A vault? You imagine treasure, or, more likely, skeletons that would jumpstart a dozen conspiracy documentaries. You decide against prying deeper, mostly because falling through stone into darkness doesn't sound like a soothing bedtime experience. As you crawl back out into the night, the ruined city seems different. Not just ruins, but a message. The geometry, the birds, the spirals, the acoustics. It's all deliberate, all stitched into the fabric of the place. Maybe Hyperborea wasn't a paradise of endless sunshine after all. Maybe it was a city of riddles, a testing ground for those who sought knowledge. Walk the streets, follow the spirals, endure the echoes, and if you survive, perhaps you're allowed to glimpse the secret. You stand at the center of the square, the toppled obelisk stretching before you. The stars above shimmer faintly, and for a moment you wonder if they're looking down with the same curious, critical gaze you've been casting upward. You breathe out slowly, letting the ruined city keep its secrets. For now, the stones are quiet, though you swear you can still hear faint whispers chasing each other through the echoes. Leaving the ruined city behind, you descend into a landscape that feels less like geography and more like a half-forgotten dream. The ground slopes downward into a basin, and there, etched against the twilight horizon, you see mounds, ridges, and shallow depressions. At first, you assume they're natural hills shaped by glaciers. But as you get closer, you notice something uncanny. The arrangement is too neat, too purposeful. Lines stretch straight for hundreds of meters, circles overlap with squares, and spirals. You knew there'd be more spirals, coiled tightly into the earth that you've stumbled into geoglyph country, the kind of place archaeologists drool over and skeptics roll their eyes at. Mainstream history is familiar with geoglyphs like Peru's Nazca lines, giant figures only visible from above, etched centuries before humans supposedly had aerial perspectives. Historians still argue whether they were ritual pathways, astronomical markers, or just the ancient world's version of doodling. But here, in Hyperborea, the shapes feel stranger, denser. They don't form animals or gods. Instead, they look like circuitry, sprawling diagrams too big to grasp with one glance. You step carefully along one of the ridges. It's made of piled stones, some the size of melons, others so large they'd take a team of oxen to move. And yet here they are, balanced and aligned as if someone knew exactly how to place each one. The ridge curves and then splits, creating a branching pattern like veins or rivers, or maybe wiring. You mutter, if ancient engineers had blueprints, this must have been page one. As you continue, you find yourself inside a vast circle. It's enormous, nearly the size of a stadium. Standing at the center, you feel oddly small, as though you've been placed in a living diagram. Looking outward, you realize the circle aligns with distant landmarks. The broken city to the west, the standing stones to the east, and a ridge pointing directly north. Could it be an astronomical compass? Quirky fact. In Britain, some researchers believe ancient Hengest doubled as calendars, marking solstices and equinoxes with uncanny accuracy. Was Hyperborea doing the same, just on a much larger, almost obsessive scale? The wind picks up, and from your elevated position, you glimpse the full sprawl of the glyphs. They stretch for kilometers, so massive they could only be appreciated from the air. Which, of course, makes no sense. Unless you muse, someone, or something had that aerial perspective long before hot air balloons or satellites. Historians still argue whether cultures could create such massive patterns without seeing the whole picture. But the precision here leaves you doubtful. Someone saw. You kneel to examine a particular spiral carved into the earth. At its center lies a shallow pit filled with darker soil. Curiosity gets the better of you, so you scrape with your hand, expecting just dirt. Instead, you feel stone, smooth, cool, deliberately worked. A flat slab, buried and forgotten. You chuckle nervously. Great, I've just opened the lid of a cosmic lunchbox. The slab stays put, of course, but the thought lingers. What if each spiral is a seal, covering chambers or caches of knowledge? Walking farther, you find a line of mounds shaped like teardrops. Each one is about waist high, covered in grass, but when you touch them, the ground feels too firm to be ordinary soil. Maybe cairns, maybe burial sites. Fringe enthusiasts might leap at the chance to declare them tombs of Hyperborean kings, while mainstream archaeologists might shrug and call them storage pits. Still, the arrangement, teardrops pointing toward the northern horizon, gnaws at you. Why teardrops? Why north? The air is crisp and the silence oppressive, broken only by the crunch of your steps. You can't shake the sense of being observed, not by animals or people, but by the shapes themselves. It's as though you're trespassing inside a massive message, one designed not for the eyes, but for the sky. The glyphs aren't here for you, you realize. They're here for watchers above. Imagine a being looking down, seeing these ridges, spirals, and lines glowing under starlight like a map. That watcher would understand immediately, while you, mere human, stuck at ground level, wander in circles. You sit on a stone outcrop and let your eyes trace the geometry. Your modern brain wants to overlay it with familiar systems, wiring diagrams, circuit boards, even subway maps. It's almost comical. If Hyperborea had Wi-Fi, I bet the signal was killer. You mutter, chuckling into the stillness. But the more you stare, the more it feels like communication, a silent dialogue with the heavens. Carved into earth, there's an old fringe idea you remember, whispered in late-night documentaries. What if geoglyphs were beacons, meant to be seen not by gods, but by travelers? Imagine ships, not the wooden kind, but the kind that hum and hover, glancing down and recognizing the symbols as landing instructions. Spirals for descent, lines for runways, circles for gathering places. Mainstream scholars laugh at such notions, but standing here, in a basin covered with earth-drawn diagrams, you find the idea less laughable as dusk deepens. Shadows stretch across the glyphs, and they seem to shift shape. Lines that looked like circuits now resemble rivers. Circles become eyes staring skyward. The ambiguity is maddening, but maybe that's the point. Multiple layers of meaning, readable depending on who, or what, is looking. Historians still argue whether symbols need only one purpose, but Hyperborea's glyphs seem to shout, why not many? You take one last walk through the basin, letting the shapes guide you. The ridges lead to spirals, the spirals to circles, the circles to teardrops. Always northward, always pointing to something just beyond reach. The whole landscape feels alive, as though it's less a ruin and more a heartbeat. Steady, pulsing beneath the earth, by the time you climb out of the basin, night has fully claimed the sky. Looking back, the glyphs vanish into darkness, as if they never existed. But in your mind, the patterns remain, looping and intertwining like an endless code you'll never quite crack. You shake your head, smile faintly, and whisper, "Message received, Hyperborea. I just wish I knew what language you're speaking." The night presses close, cool and absolute, as you leave the basin of glyphs. Your footsteps crunch over gravel until the terrain changes beneath you, softer, looser, as though you've stepped into an ancient bed of ash. The moonlight makes the ground gleam pale, and soon you realize it isn't ash at all. It's salt, miles of it, stretched like a white desert, shimmering faintly. Salt plains, empty and echoing, like a frozen sea. You can almost taste it on the air, sharp and dry, biting at your throat. Salt has always been more than seasoning. It's history itself. In Roman times, soldiers were partly paid in salt, hence the word salary. Empires rose and fell around salt routes. Whole wars sparked over its control. And here, in Hyperborea, the salt plain feels like more than coincidence. Maybe this was once an inland sea, dried and forgotten, leaving only this brittle ghost behind. Or perhaps, your mind drifts with the thought, it was deliberately harvested, scraped into white emptiness by hands that wanted it barren, blank, a canvas for something else. Historians still argue whether ancient salt deserts were purely natural formations or manipulated landscapes. Looking at this one, you feel the argument breathing under your feet. You walk farther, and the crunch grows stranger. At times it sounds hollow, as though a thin crust hides chambers beneath. You pause, stomping gently, half expecting the ground to cave in like brittle sugar. It doesn't, thankfully, though the sensation makes you laugh softly. Great. If I vanish down a salt sinkhole, at least I'll be well preserved. Then you see them, long ridges breaking the flat plain. At first you think they're dunes, but they shimmer differently, edges catching the moonlight. Drawing closer, you realize they're walls. Not built walls exactly, but carved, etched directly from salt, reinforced with dark stones. A labyrinth. The realization chills you. You trace the line of one wall with your fingertips. The surface is smooth, almost glassy, as if polished by centuries of wind or maybe by human hands with tools now long forgotten. The labyrinth twists in directions you can't easily map. Left turns, right turns, sudden dead ends. All of it laid out across miles of salted earth. Who built this, and why? Labyrinths have always fascinated human cultures. In Greek mythology, there was the Minotaur's maze in Crete, a prison so complex no one could escape. In medieval times, labyrinths were carved into cathedral floors, places where pilgrims walked in meditative spirals, symbolic journeys toward salvation. And here, in the salt plain of Hyperborea, you wonder whether this maze was both a prison and a prayer. You step inside, careful to mark your path with scuffs on the ground. The walls are taller than you expect, looming over your shoulders, sometimes over your head, so that the stars above vanish into narrow corridors. The silence deepens. You're suddenly aware of your own breathing, too loud, too sharp. It feels like trespass. Halfway through a corridor, you notice patterns scratched into the walls. Not random marks, geometric shapes, triangles within circles, spirals, crosshatches. They remind you of the glyphs from earlier, but closer, more intimate. You run your hand across a triangle, feeling the grooves bite into your skin. Were these instructions for navigating, or symbols of something deeper? Fringe thinkers love to argue that labyrinths were maps, blueprints of the cosmos itself. Maybe walking them wasn't just physical, but spiritual, like downloading a code into your bones. That a quirky historical tidbit pops to mind. In Scandinavia, there are stone labyrinths along the coast, built by fishermen. They'd walk through them before sailing, believing it would trap evil spirits inside the maze, leaving their boats safe from harm. Maybe Hyperborea's labyrinth was the same idea, scaled up to continental size. A ritual to trap not spirits of the sea, but something bigger. You try not to dwell on what exactly needed trapping here. Your footsteps echo as you turn another corner, only to find a dead end. The wall here is marked with a spiral, larger than the others, carved deep into the salt. You lean closer and realize the spiral doubles as a hollow groove, wide enough to fit your arm. You hesitate, then laugh nervously. What's the worst that could happen? You slide your fingers in. The groove is cool, unnervingly smooth, and it seems to lead downward, vanishing into the earth. You pull back quickly, shivering. The spiral feels less like art and more like a handle, a keyhole, or maybe a drain. You move on, shaken, tracing your path backward. The labyrinth begins to feel alive, each turn shifting in memory so that you're never sure you've walked this corridor before. The salt crunches beneath you like brittle bones, and once or twice, you hear a faint echo that doesn't belong to your own steps. Perhaps it's just the wind threading through the maze, but then again, perhaps not. Historians still argue whether labyrinths were meant for people or for something else entirely. Walking here, you begin to suspect the latter. Eventually, the walls lower. The labyrinth opens into a central chamber, wide and circular, ringed by upright slabs of dark stone. In the middle, a depression collects the faintest glimmer of water, briny, stagnant, a mirror reflecting the stars above. You kneel, peering at your reflection, distorted by ripples. For a fleeting second, the face staring back doesn't look like yours. Its eyes seem deeper, wider, as though they belong to someone who's been watching you since before you stepped onto the salt. You blink, and the illusion is gone. Just you, tired and unnerved. You dip your fingers into the water and taste the salt, sharp, metallic, ancient. Maybe this pool was the labyrinth's destination, a place of offering. Or maybe it was just a cruel joke, a long walk to find only brine. Either way, you rise and whisper a thank you to the silence, as though acknowledging a host you can't quite see. Leaving the chamber, you retrace your way out. By some miracle, or maybe by design, you find the entrance without too much wandering. Emerging onto the open salt plain again feels like freedom, though you can't shake the impression that the labyrinth hasn't let you go. It still hums behind you, a structure not fully of stone or salt, but of intent. A machine you walked through, one that might keep working long after you've gone. As you trudge onward, the moon hangs low, casting silver light across the endless white. The labyrinth fades behind, but you feel its walls in your bones, echoing like a puzzle you'll never solve. You murmur into the night, half in awe, half in exhaustion. Whoever built that, you really didn't want anyone to sleep easy, did you? The salt plain dwindles behind you, its glittering white dissolving into darkness as the ground hardens again beneath your feet. The silence shifts, becoming heavier, as though even the air itself resists what lies ahead. Soon, the land rises gently, and with it comes the faintest trace of shadowy shapes against the moonlight. At first, they look like broken teeth jutting from the earth, but as you draw closer, they reveal themselves as something stranger, monoliths, huge, uneven stones, some twice your height, others towering like the pillars of forgotten temples. They lean and tilt at odd angles, scattered in clusters, but unmistakably arranged with intention. It reminds you of Stonehenge, of Karnak in France, of the countless stone circles across Britain, Ireland, and Scandinavia. Cultures separated by seas, languages, and centuries, but all driven to erect massive stones in patterns no one fully understands. And now, here in the wilderness of Hyperborea, another circle rises before you, its builders anonymous, its meaning uncertain. You step between them, brushing your hands along rough surfaces. The stones are scarred, not only by weather but by deliberate markings, lines, grooves, spirals, some worn almost invisible. They're not decorative. They feel functional, like inscriptions or like the faint remnants of star charts. Archaeologists often argue whether megalithic sites were calendars, observatories, or places of ritual. Looking at these stones, you can't decide. They seem capable of all three, and perhaps of things modern science doesn't dare name. Above you, the night sky stretches vast and clear, every star sharp. You notice how the stones align with them, framing constellations as if on purpose. One pair of uprights seems to cradle the North Star exactly. Another points toward Orion's belt. And when you stand in the center of the circle, the moon itself drifts neatly through a notch in the tallest stone. You whisper into the silence. You were watching the sky, weren't you? Charting it, or calling to it. A chill runs down your arms, gooseflesh prickling. You think of how cultures everywhere lifted their eyes upward and wondered. In Mesopotamia, ziggurats were stairways for priests to climb closer to the stars. In Egypt, pyramids mirrored constellations, aligning with Orion and Sirius. Even the Mayans built temples as giant calendars, predicting eclipses and solstices with uncanny precision. Perhaps Hyperborea's monoliths belong to the same family, a geometry not meant for us to live inside, but to connect earth to sky. You wander to one particularly massive slab, cracked down the middle. Leaning against it, you press your ear to the stone. At first, nothing, just the cool solidity of ancient rock. Then, faintly, a vibration. Not sound exactly, but a deep humming, as though the stone remembers something. You hold your breath, half convinced it's your imagination. Yet the sensation persists, steady, patient, like the lingering resonance of a struck bell. There's a strange calm in knowing the stone has stood here for millennia. Empires rose and collapsed, seas shifted, languages died, and still this slab endures, humming to itself in the night. You murmur, almost reverently, "You've seen more than any of us ever will." Nearby, at the base of another monolith, lies a scattering of objects. Bones, not human, but animal, goat, bird, perhaps deer. Sacrifices, you realize. Offerings left to whatever the stones represented. The thought unsettles you, though sacrifice has been part of human ritual since the beginning. At Stonehenge, evidence suggests animal feasts during solstice gatherings. In the temples of Carthage, offerings were made to Baal. Even in Hyperborea, it seems, the act of giving something up, something alive, was the price for communion with mystery. Your gaze drifts upward again. The stars pulse, ancient light falling across ancient rock. For a moment, you imagine the stones not as ruins but alive, active, glowing with fire, drawing constellations down like threads of light. Maybe once, rituals here weren't just symbolic but functional. Machines of stone pulling the heavens closer. That a quirky fact surfaces. In 1919, during an experiment in Cornwall, researchers discovered that certain stone circles produced acoustic effects. Standing inside, whispers carried unnaturally far, while sounds from outside dulled almost completely. A natural amplifier. The thought makes you glance around. If this Hyperborean circle worked the same way, voices raised here might have carried for miles, echoing under the stars like commands to the sky. Suddenly, you long to test it. You stand in the center, lift your chin, and whisper, "Hello." The sound slips from your lips, soft and unremarkable. Yet it bounces back, faint but distinct, as though someone behind you has echoed the word. You freeze. Slowly, you turn. Nothing. Only stones, silent, indifferent. You laugh nervously, telling yourself it's just acoustics. Still, the echo feels delayed, like a voice deciding whether or not to answer. You sit cross-legged in the center, forcing yourself to breathe slowly. The stones loom, the stars blaze, and the hum beneath your palm continues. The scene is hypnotic. You imagine the builders gathering here thousands of years ago, fires flickering, chants rising. They would have known the stars better than we ever will, knew them as living presences, predictable yet personal. For them, the stones weren't relics. They were tools, bridges, instruments of alignment. But for you, sitting here now, they are something else. A reminder that the world is older, stranger, and more patient than you can comprehend. Whatever these stones were meant to do, they are still doing it. Whether as markers, calendars, or gateways, their purpose lingers. You feel both comforted and dwarfed by the thought. The wind rises, sweeping across the circle. It whistles against the monoliths, producing low tones, almost like a song. You close your eyes, listening. For a brief, suspended moment, you feel weightless, untethered, as though the stones and stars have folded you into their design. Then the wind shifts and the tones fade. The song is gone. You rise slowly, brushing salt dust from your clothes, and step backward through the stones. Leaving feels harder than you expect, like walking away from a conversation unfinished. At the edge of the circle, you glance back. The stones are motionless, unyielding. Yet you can't shake the impression that they're watching you leave, measuring the angle of your shadow as carefully as they once measured the stars. The path ahead waits, darker now, but you carry the circle within you. A pattern you'll never fully solve, humming softly in memory. You whisper one last thought to the silent monoliths before turning away. I'll remember, even if no one else does. The monoliths linger in your memory like tall sentinels, and though you have stepped beyond their shadows, their presence hums faintly in your chest. The path now narrows, threading between low ridges of stone, as if the land itself funnels you towards some deeper secret. The moon has dipped lower, painting long angles across the ground, and the air grows cooler, stiller, as though even the night holds its breath. Before long, the ridge falls away, and you find yourself standing at the edge of a vast depression in the earth. A crater, wide, silent, and unervingly symmetrical. Its bowl dips inward, dark and smooth, as though something unimaginably large once struck here. The rocks around its rim are blackened, scorched, cracked by heat so ancient that moss has long since claimed them. Your first thought is of meteors, of cosmic debris plunging from the sky in a fiery storm. But your second thought, the one you don't want to admit, comes from the old myths. Legends of gods descending in fire, of sky chariots burning trails through the heavens, of lights that fell and taught humanity strange wisdom. Could this crater be more than natural? Could it be one of those places where myth and geology overlap? You take the first step down into the bowl. The ground slopes gently, covered in fine gravel that crunches softly beneath your feet. Each step seems to pull you deeper, away from the stars above, until the rim is high over your shoulders and the outside world has vanished. In the center of the crater, the air feels charged, thick, almost metallic on your tongue. It reminds you of standing near old radio towers or the hum of power lines in the rain. Invisible, but present, you crouch and run your fingers through the soil. It glitters faintly, tiny fragments of something fused, neither stone nor metal. Tektites, you recall, the glassy remnants of impacts. Ancient cultures often prized them, carving amulets from the strange glass fallen from the sky. To hold one was to hold a piece of the cosmos. Standing again, you feel the urge to look upward. The stars wheel above the crater, and for a moment it seems as though the bowl itself frames them, a mirror inverted. You imagine ancient Hyperboreans gathering here, watching a meteor blaze across the sky, believing they had witnessed not destruction but arrival. The place where the heavens touch the earth, that a peculiar echo rises as you move. Not the crisp echo of stone, but a low resonance, as though the entire crater acts like a chamber. Some geologists note that certain impact sites vibrate differently, producing strange acoustic effects. Perhaps the Hyperboreans noticed it too. Perhaps they sang here, their voices carried on the bowl's curved walls, amplified into something larger than human throats could ever produce. You pause in the middle and whisper, testing it. The sound returns, softer, distorted, but undeniably different, like a voice stretched thin by distance. You repeat the word, louder, and the crater returns it not as an echo, but as a second voice, altered, foreign. The hair on your arms lifts. You murmur to yourself, no wonder they thought this was holy, that a legend surfaces from the back of your memory. The Tunguska event of 1908, when an explosion flattened thousands of trees in Siberia, believed to be caused by a comet or asteroid. For decades afterward, local stories spoke of fire spirits, of sky gods punishing the earth. What modern science labeled impact or airburst, the people called visitation. Hyperborea, too, must have had its Tunguska, and they must have stood here in awe, watching the fire rain and believing they had been chosen. You sit cross-legged in the gravel, listening to the hum of silence. The crater holds sound differently, but it also holds time. Sitting here, you feel detached from chronology, as though the bowl has swallowed every moment of the past into one continuous presence. You wonder if this is why the ancients came, to escape the linear march of days, to sit in a place where time folds in on itself. You tee the edge of your vision, something glints. You crawl closer, brushing away dirt. A shard of dark glass, sharp-edged, heavy in your hand. You turn it, watching how it catches moonlight. The surface feels warm, absurdly so, as though it still remembers the heat of entry, thousands of years later. You whisper, "A star in my palm." A strange peace settles over you. In the crater's silence, it doesn't matter whether the object is scientific or mythical. It is both, a fragment of the cosmos, a relic of fire. Holding it, you feel an unexpected intimacy with the universe. Not the vast, cold distances of space, but the closeness of having touched what once burned across the heavens. When you finally rise, the shard still in your hand, you climb slowly toward the crater's rim. Each step feels heavier, as if the bowl resists letting you go. At the top, you pause and look back. The depression glows faintly under moonlight, its curves impossibly smooth, like a scar carved into the flesh of the earth. You think of scars differently now. They are not just marks of pain, but proof of survival. This crater is a scar, yes, but also a memory. And like every memory, it shapes what follows. Perhaps for Hyperborea, this scar was a birthmark, a sign that the heavens had once stooped low enough to touch them. You breathe deeply, the metallic taste fading, replaced by the cleaner air beyond the rim. The shard in your hand hums faintly against your palm. You tuck it into your pocket, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. The kind of reminder you'll never show anyone, because they'd only see rock. But you'll know as you walk away. The crater dwindles behind you, sinking into shadow. Yet you carry it within you, the echo of its strange voice, the memory of its charged air. Another secret absorbed, another mystery folded into the vast silence of Hyperborea. And ahead, faint, on the horizon, you glimpse a glow. Not starlight, not moonlight, something else. A flicker, a promise. Your journey isn't done yet. The faint glow grows steadier as you walk, threading your way through the silent ridges that stretch beyond the crater. At first you think it might be dawn, the first pale strokes of sunlight bleeding into the horizon. But no, it is too early, and the color is wrong. This light shimmers faintly, pulsing as though alive, and it seems to beckon you forward like a lantern held by an unseen hand. The air thickens with quiet expectancy. Each step feels like stepping across an invisible threshold, deeper into territory that resists easy explanation. The gravel gives way to smoother ground, almost polished, as if countless feet once passed here, or perhaps something greater smoothed the earth into this pathway. You follow it, compelled, until the glow resolves into something more defined. A stone arch. The arch rises impossibly tall, carved from a single block of pale stone that gleams faintly from within. It stands alone in the landscape, unsupported, and yet it does not crumble. Symbols crawl across its surface, etched deep, spiraling in patterns that both repel and entice your gaze. Some look like constellations, others like fragments of forgotten alphabets. When you approach, you realize the glow isn't coming from the arch at all. It's coming through it. The space within its curve ripples faintly, not quite solid, not quite air. Like heat haze over asphalt, or the shimmer of light on water. You step closer, and a low hum threads through your bones. You hesitate. Every instinct tells you this is a boundary. On this side, the world you know, however strange and sleepless it has become. Beyond, something else. You whisper to yourself, you probably won't survive this, and even laugh quietly at your own joke, though your voice trembles. But here, hesitation is useless. You raise a hand and touch the arch's inner curve. It is cool, smoother than marble, vibrating softly under your fingertips. The glow ripples, as though acknowledging you. And then, with a breath you're not even aware of holding, you step through. The world shifts. You stand in a wide plain, under a sky lit not by stars or moon, but by a soft auroral glow, ribbons of green and violet undulating across the heavens. The air is warmer here, rich with the scent of pine and something faintly metallic. The land stretches outward in all directions, but scattered across it are structures, crystalline spires, stone circles, terraces cut into hillsides. It feels both alien and familiar, like walking into a memory you never lived. Shapes move in the distance, human-like, but taller, slower in their gestures. They are draped in fabric that seems to shimmer like water, and though you cannot hear their voices, the air vibrates faintly, as if they communicate in a register beyond your ears. You blink, and for a moment they vanish, as though never there. But the sense remains. You are not alone. You step forward cautiously, your feet crunching against soil that glitters faintly, like powdered crystal. The ground hums with energy, the same hum you felt in the crater, only stronger here, concentrated. You realize with a strange clarity, this is Hyperborea, not as ruin, not as myth, but as echo. A pocket of persistence, a memory the earth refuses to let die. Historians still argue whether Hyperborea was ever real, whether it was just a poetic invention of the Greeks, an imagined northern paradise. But standing here, in this shimmering in-between, you realize the debate misses the point. Whether or not Hyperborea was real in the historical sense, it is real in the way dreams are real. In the way stories carve grooves in our minds that last longer than stone. You walk among the spires. They are not made of glass, nor metal, nor any material you can name. They are translucent, bending light in strange ways. And when you brush your hand against one, it hums in harmony with your heartbeat. You laugh softly, whispering. So this is what happens when your Fitbit syncs with ancient gods. The spire doesn't mind your joke. It just resonates gently, like a tuning fork struck by invisible hands. Further on, you reach a circle of stones. They stand waist high, etched with more symbols, and at the center lies a shallow pool. The water is impossibly still, reflecting not the sky above, but something deeper. Shapes move in its surface, images of human history. You see pyramids rising, ships cutting across stormy seas, cities flickering into being and crumbling again. For a heartbeat, you think you see yourself reflected there, walking in endless circles, whispering these histories into the night. You dip your fingers into the water. It feels cool, then warm, then both at once. When you lift your hand, no droplets fall. It clings, luminous, to your skin before fading into nothing. You shiver, not from fear, but from recognition. This is not a place of answers. It is a place of memory. A library, not of books, but of sensations, of echoes, of possibilities. You sit by the pool for a long while, breathing slowly, the hum of Hyperborea seeping into your bones. You think of mainstream history, the chronicles, the timelines, the neat diagrams of who ruled when and who conquered whom. And then you think of this, the undercurrent of myth and mystery, the possibilities that haunt the margins of textbooks. Both coexist, you realize. One tells you what happened. The other tells you what it felt like. Gradually, the auroral light dims, the spires blur, and the pool stills. The shimmering begins to fade. You understand, this vision isn't permanent. It's a glimpse, a gift, nothing more. Slowly, you stand, brushing glittering soil from your hands. You whisper, "Thank you," to no one in particular, and step back the way you came. The arch greets you again, glowing faintly. You cross through, and the world steadies. The glow fades behind you. The ridges return. The crater lies silent in the distance. Hyperborea has receded once more, tucked back into myth. You breathe in the cool night air. The stars overhead seem both brighter and smaller now, as if you've glimpsed their source and returned to the shadow. You walk onward, pocket still holding the shard of star glass, your heartbeat steady, your thoughts softer. And as your steps slow, the edges of sleep creep and wind down. Almost equals 300 words. Now, as the path fades and the landscape quiets, let your breath settle into an easy rhythm. The mysteries of Hyperborea, whether glimpsed in craters, arches, or auroras, don't need solving tonight. They can simply drift in your mind like clouds, gentle and unhurried. Each question that remains is not a burden, but a lullaby, reminding you that the world is larger, stranger, and softer than you imagined. Picture the arch one last time, glowing faintly in the dark. See yourself walking away from it, the hum of its energy dissolving into distance. With each step, the light dims further, until it's no more than a spark in memory. The silence that follows is deep, calming, steady, like the hush of snow falling or the quiet lap of waves against a shore. Let that hush wrap around you now, like a blanket. Let your body grow heavy, your thoughts light, drifting further and further toward stillness. Even the shard of star glass, still warm in your pocket, softens into nothing more than a dream. The questions will be there tomorrow. The stories will wait. For now, there is only this moment, this breath, this gentle slide into sleep. Close your eyes. Feel the rhythm of the night carry you, and let Hyperborea's secrets rest with you, folded into the dreamscape. Good night.